On today's episode, we get to preview the Hurricanes in their final tune-up to the preseason. They have 2 more games left before it all starts to count next week. That and so much more on a Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the everydayer for making this your first listen of the day. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the Carolina Hurricanes credentialed beat writer over at the Hockey Writers. I'm also going to be starting a Chicago Wolves weekly column here called Wolves Weekly, starting very, very soon. I'm also the co-host of the Surgecast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all my other duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. Got a fun show for you to wrap up the week as we get to listen to Rod Brind'Amour's press conference after Thursday's practices, as he gets to talk about what we should be looking for in terms of lineups for the last 2 games of the preseason, and talking about how it's interesting for the defensemen to come into the system and learn as much as they can, especially in their first year. And like I said, we also get to preview the final 2 preseason games as the Hurricanes play on Friday night against the Tampa Bay Lightning at home, and then on Saturday in Nashville. And then finally, the Chicago Wolves have officially started their AHL camp. And we get to discuss on who's already at camp right now and where should we be looking for certain cuts before the weekend ends out. But before we start all of that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet. Let's get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. So like I said, we get to listen to Rod Brind'Amour in here in a little bit as he met with media after practice on Thursday and kind of giving an indication of what we should be looking for in terms of, what type of rosters we're going to be looking at for Friday night's game at home against Tampa, and then also on Saturday against the Nashville Predators. And, they ask him about, what's like trying to, learn the system for the defense. And they talk about Dmitry Orlov for a little bit. And they also, do mention Sean Walker and just how it's, it takes some time for new guys to learn the system. It took Dmitry Orlov a little bit, half a season last year, but finally got into his groove in the back half of the season. And so, Sean Walker's doing pretty well so far in camp. Of course, there's still a lot more to learn from because you only do so much in the span of a couple of weeks. But, he is definitely a lot farther ahead, thanks in part to Shane Gostisbehere being his defensive partner and, Sean Walker being someone who can seem pretty learn on the fly, and that's why a lot of people are high up on him, within the organization, even at the trade deadline last season. So without further ado, let's jump into the press conference and hear Rod Brind'Amour's thoughts on the upcoming rosters and talking about what the aspect is of learning this defensive system.
Having a guy like that on this team won a cup and experience it.
Yeah, well, hoping that everything you just said, right, that comes out. Knows how to play, because when you've been through it, experience is everything. And then just, to me, it's more, though, for him, it's just how he plays. That's what you need on your team, and especially what we've lost. It's a good fit, and hopefully that's what we'll see.
How much does the playoffs, where you didn't have passion, you had to give Orlov and Chatfield more minutes, prepare them for this role where they're probably taking on more minutes this season?
Yeah, I think, that's a big deal. That playoffs, we didn't have him, and that was a big guy, and we had to play without it. And I thought the D especially did well. So, like you mentioned, it's super important position. All of them are, but the D and, Orly, I think, the second half of the year last year kind of rounded into shape, and that's what we're going to need, though, I think, more from the start. We can't wait. We don't have that runway, I don't think, that we've had in the past.
Was that just adapting, you think, for him? Just getting used to what
Well, there's probably a lot of factors, but yeah, it's a whole new system that he's probably been used to, and a way of thinking too, I think, for him.
Do you worry about that with Walker, coming in, same thing, he needs to?
A little bit, but
yeah.
I'm not worried. It's just it takes a little time. You have to remember, guys have played a couple games. It's you got to give him a little time here to get really acclimated. And we haven't really seen one game with like the guys they're going to play with. So that's also an issue there.
With 2 preseason games left, do you think you're going to go more veteran heavy these last 2? Or
Well, for sure for one, more than likely tomorrow. And then probably not going to see too many guys play doubleheader back-to-back. So, we'll see how that last game shakes out.
Speaking of guys who might be playing with one another, we saw Jackson Blake in a little bit of a different setting last night, playing with maybe not so much the younger guys, but Robinson and Drury, I believe. What did you make of him in that setting?
Yeah, I mean, he's been good. I think he's, an interesting player that you're kind of trying to give him every opportunity to see where he could fit. Could he fit with these guys, that guy? Different role maybe even. But at the end of the day, really, it's just giving those guys those games to really, for us to get a better feel of where they need to grow, or can they be here? I don't really think it's a question of, will they end up being here? It's just kind of, is the timing right? Because you definitely see that there's a lot in there.
I was going to say with Felix, has the decision been made to groom him as a center yet, or is it just taking a look at how he...
I don't think they any decision like that. I just think we, asked, kind of put him at center and see how camp went, and maybe this year they might, leave him there if he doesn't make our team. I don't really know exactly how we want to do this, but you got a special player, and I think he might be better suited to play center, just the way he's built and the way he thinks the game. And I think we can always, like I said, put a guy back on the wing. I feel like that's not a hard transition. It's just we don't want to be sitting here 2 years from now and go, hey, let's throw him at center. I don't think that's probably the right thing to do.
Back to defense, I remember a few years ago I was just sitting in the stands with Huff, and he mentioned that Chatty was the kind of player that fits your system perfectly, even before he was really playing full-time with you. How have you seen him grow, and what was it about his game that made him a good fit before he was even here necessarily?
Right. We liked him right away. Actually, probably the first time we laid eyes on him. Kind of one of those players that really just fortunate that slipped through the cracks, maybe, if that's the way to put it, because I feel like that's what happened with him. And then, I know the first year we couldn't really find a spot for him. We defense has been pretty strong for us, and then we're able to get him that spot, and really, really happy to obviously, lock him down for a little while, because he's a guy that can log more, like a lot of minutes if you need him, and I think he can, kind of go with anybody, and that's really important.
And some untapped offense there.
Yeah.
Well, not even untapped necessarily.
Yeah,
did
but
pretty well.
when you can skate, then the game kind of opens up.
Big thank you to Rod Brind'Amour and the Hurricanes for the audio on the interview. And Rod does jump into a lot of different things. The fact that what you're going to be looking at when we're talking about here, when we do our preview here in a little bit, of it's going to be a very heavy NHL roster going into Friday night's game, because that's what you usually do for home games. You want to go with more of a heavier lineup. But of course, we saw that was different in the other game against Nashville on Wednesday night, where it was more of the prospects and stuff like that, just of how all that stuff worked out. But we'll talk about that more in segment 2. But then he also gets to talk about how you look at how the untapped potential of just like how good Jalen Chatfield has gotten, especially with how he played with Orlov last year for certain parts of the most of the season. Just Walker just trying to get used to the system as well, and that's something that they talk about Orlov. It's just they took him a little bit. Same thing for Walker. That's just how it is with this the structure of how they want to work this defense and stuff like that. And then you get to hear how he talked about Felix Unger-Storm, of how, he's been mainly playing wing his entire career, and they bring him into camp. They want to see how he does at center. And it seems like for the most part, it's going pretty decently. He did win a good number of faceoffs against Nashville. Does he have to get a little bit bigger? Yeah, especially if they're going to look at him as a center, because when you look at the depth of the wings, there's so many guys that they have right now. Like I said, Bradley Nadeau. They also got Jackson Blake. They got Gleb Triksov. It's just one of those things where you look at the winger positions, especially when you look at the AHL club. You got Seth Jarvis, Andrei Svechnikov, Martin Necas, Jack Roslovic, Jordan Martinook. Like I said, you also got the Blake and those guys. You also have William Carrier. Like your top 9 is basically almost set with just Carrier, Martinook, and the other, Nietzsche, Svetch, Roslovic, and Jarvis. Then you look at your fourth line. Okay, maybe you have Robinson. You got Berlin Lemieux. And like when you look at the other prospects too. But then you look at center. There's possibilities where Felix Ungerstrom could maybe make himself a case into being a center where it's like, you do have Aho. You got Kotkaniemi for, hopefully he turns it around. You got Jordan Stahl for another, with his contract. And you got Jack Drury as your 4C. And then you maybe have some other guys like a Tyson Jost as a center. Ryan's, you got Ryan Suzuki, but it's just one of those things where they're very kind of slim at the center position. So if they think they can put Felix Ungerstrom in that position to make himself a decent or a bona fide center, and that's why they've been working with him a lot in camp to be that guy, then there might be a good possibility where the Hurricanes are like, yeah, it's always easy to put him back on the wing if need be. But they took instead of we look at the Toronto Maple Leafs, how they're for the however many time trying to see if William Nylander could play center, but they always kind of ditch it early. The Hurricanes right out from the rip at camp is we're going to try him at center, see how he does. And he's been there the entire time, and it seems like his progression is getting somewhat better over time. And of course, if he's going, let's say he doesn't make the main roster and go to Chicago with Cam Abbott and all those guys, he wouldn't be bad 1 or 2C on the Chicago Wolves if he's going to be 1C ahead of Ryan Suzuki, or maybe he doesn't get all the maybe he doesn't get battered on that 1C role. Maybe he starts at the 2C spot. That wouldn't be bad. So that's something to really keep an eye on when it comes to Felix Ungerstrom and how how the Canes want him to develop there. And of course, if he goes to Chicago, we know that the Hurricanes are going to try to and with the Wolves are going to try to run the same system the Canes do, just with Cam Abbott. So there's a possibility where you can see Felix Ungerstrom playing a lot of center this upcoming season, whether it be in Raleigh or it be in Chicago in the AHL with the Wolves. So it'll be very, very interesting to keep an eye on. So we did hear at the press conference that Rod is, going to go with the AHL heavy lineup for Friday night's game against the Tampa Bay Lightning, and we're going to see more of the prospects and the younger guys going to be in Saturday's game. So we'll dive into more of all of that here in a second. So stick around as we get to segment 2 here in a little bit on a Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Where can you do that? Well, you can do that at FanDuel.com. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. It's like we heard the end of first segment 1, where we're going to be looking at see what the rosters are going to be looking like for Rod Brind'Amour and the Carolina Hurricanes as they start their final 2 games of the preseason. And just right off the start, so the game against Tampa Bay at home Friday night at Lenovo Center is going to be at 7 p.m. Eastern. Of course, that's going to be on the Hurricanes website at hurricanes.com. And of course, you can listen to Mike Maniscalco and Trip Tracy on 99.9 The Fan for the radio side of things. And then they play their last game on October 5th, which is Saturday in Nashville against the Predators at Bridgestone Arena. That'll be at 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 Central. And of course, same thing, hurricanes.com. And then Mike and Trip are going to be on the call at 99.9 The Fan. So that's kind of how we've been doing for most of the preseason. Luckily, we're going to be back very, very soon to Bally Sports and all of that. Also, too, just a quick note, the Hurricanes non-game group will be skating at 10 a.m. on Friday at Lenovo Center. And Rod Brind'Amour will be available for media after the practice. And, of course, the game group will not be skating on Friday. So it's just going to be the non-game group. So we know what the roster is for who's going to be playing that night. So they're not going to be – no practice for them, no morning skate. It's just going to be, the PTO guys, the prospects, and all of them who are going to be playing on Saturday. They're going to be the only ones practicing. And, of course, the game's at 7 p.m. So that's just a small, quick note from Hurricanes PR of just what the practice schedule is going to be this morning on Friday. So when you actually look at the main roster of who's going to be playing on Friday against Tampa Bay, you got Shane Gostisbehere, Dmitry Orlov, no surprise there. Brent Burns, Jordan Stahl. Now they do have a PTO guy in Sam Gagner. He is going to be available for the team. He's going to be wearing number 15. Sebastian Aho, Seth Jarvis, Sean Walker. No surprises there. Then you got Tyson Jost, William Carey, Andrei Svechnikov. And then in goal, you're going to have Spencer Martin and Pyotr Kochetkov. And then you're going to have Jordan Martinook along with Jackson Blake, Scott Morrow. And Scott Morrow, this is going to be his first preseason game since he's been kind of in and out of the training camp roster for the last few weeks. Then you got Jacob Slavin, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, Martin Nietzsche, and Jack Roslovic. So, of course, the two big names they're kind of jumping out at you. They're not the mainstays on the main roster right now. Of course, you got Scott Morrow. Like I said, it's going to be his first actual preseason game since he's been in and out of the lineup at camp for pretty much the last couple of weeks. At least we get him into one game. And I've been saying this since from the start. I don't really see him being in Carolina this year. It's just because of the fact of where you're looking at the 6 defensemen that are going to be starting. And you're kind of just looking at who's your 7th defenseman going to be at this point. Like I said, it could be maybe Riley Stillman, but he's been in the yellow contact jersey, so I'm not sure if he's going to be one of those guys that's going to be up there. It could be a Ty Smith. It could be a Joakim Ryan. So it all really depends on what the Hurricanes want to do in terms of that 7th defenseman spot. For Scott Morrow, it's good to see him back in the lineup. It's good to see him actually playing in a regular, in a preseason game, in a game like atmosphere instead of a practice. And at least it's going to be at home with a lot of the NHL regulars. And then, of course, you got Jackson Blake, someone who's been really, his stock has really risen over the last few games, and someone who's really pushing for a opening night roster spot. Could he get it? It's a good possibility because he's been playing really well. It's just do we think that Rod Brind'Amour and his coaching staff really think that he's ready to jump into the lineup now? Could it be top 9? Could it be 4th line minutes? And I guess it really depends on what they want to do. Or, this could be you've played yourself up to maybe you're the first call up. If something happens, maybe you're going to start in Chicago. So that'd be really interesting to see how that works out. And then, of course, like I said, Sam Gagner, PTO, just to see what he can do. I'm not sure what the Hurricanes are their plans on with him. We do know for the fact that the Hurricanes are playing on Friday and Saturday. We're probably going to be expecting camp cuts probably on Sunday. It's not 100% confirmed yet, but just from getting some tea leaves going around with all the other writers, it could be a sense that you might be seeing stuff on Sunday because the fact that the Hurricanes do have Sunday, October 6th off after the back-to-back games. And then you kind of start doing some team practices starting on Monday. That's going to be running through that Thursday, October 10th. So the 7th through the 10th of next week, it's going to be nothing but team practices. I wouldn't be surprised if that is the actual roster going into Friday, October 11th. So we probably going to be seeing some guys not really being cut, but more of maybe some PTOs get released, and then a lot of the guys are probably going to get reassigned to the AHL or back overseas or however that works out. So that's kind of what you're looking at right now with just how that goes. So if you just glean, who's playing on Friday, you kind of get the idea that it's probably you're going to see, Robinson and Drury and some of those other guys, Lemieux, who weren't listed for Friday night's game. They're going to be playing on Saturday in Nashville. Of course, no surprise because you got to have your 8 veterans. Those guys are going to be on the main roster. It's just, they got to have some guys that are going to help lead the rookies and stuff like that and all the prospects and all that. So that's basically kind of what you're looking at in terms of Saturday. Nothing really too crazy in terms of you just preseason rules. Got to have eight guys, especially for the veteran status and stuff like that. So that's kind of why you've been seeing them a lot with those guys a lot more often. It's not because that Rod Brind'Amour doesn't want them playing with the main group. It's just you already know what you get with the Jack Drury and stuff like that, and also with Brendan Lemieux. But it's more of hey, just protect the young guys, kind of show them how the games go and stuff like that. So that's kind of what the main thing is. But if you look at Friday night's group, like I said, you got Tyson Jost who's right there still trying to fight for a spot. It'd be curious to see what Sam Gagner does as a PTO, but you get your two prospects in Morrow and Blake, just to give Blake another game with the main regulars because he's been doing so well in camp. They just want to see how he does at home with all the regular guys. And then you got to get Scott Morrow in there at some point. He did play last year a little bit with the Canes at the back end of the season, but it's good to at least get him into a game and just to see how he does. I want to look past that of like, oh, he's going to make the roster. It's just, hey, let's just play him with the NHL regulars. Let's do it at home and go from there. But that's kind of what you're looking at in terms of your Friday night group. And of course, everyone else who wasn't listed, they will be practicing that morning at 10 at Lenovo, and then they'll be playing Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock Eastern in Nashville. Of course, it'll be 4 o'clock that time as well. So, like I said, that's pretty much about it. And of course, everyone's been able to stream the game on Hurricanes.com and then also listen to the radio side of things with Mike and Tripp at 99.9 The Fan. So, the Hurricanes aren't the only ones in camp, as the Chicago Wolves have officially started AHL camp earlier this week. And of course, some of the names you're not going to recognize are mainly just guys who are on contracts in the AHL with the Chicago Wolves, and they're just waiting for all the other guys to get reassigned from Hurricanes camp, since they were trying to figure out, get the facilities all taken care of and stuff like that, and having a seamless transition. If you listen to the episode that I did with Shane Willis, and of course you've listened to Kane's cast, Shane said the same thing. That's why you haven't really seen a lot of transitions in terms of reassignments yet, because they're just getting stuff finalized up there in Chicago. So that when the guys do come, go down to the AHL and be reassigned, it's a nice transition for them. But we are officially underway for Chicago Wolves camp. But we'll dive into more of that here in a second on a Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. And like I said, at the end of segment 2, the Chicago Wolves are officially back as they started camp earlier this week, as you get ready for another run at the Calder Cup in the American Hockey League. And of course, now it's their first season back being affiliated with the Carolina Hurricanes after being independent last year. And it's good to see for the Carolina Hurricanes the fact they have affiliate once again, instead of having all their guys being kind of here, there, and everywhere, basically, and having a lot of guys go back to Europe and stuff like that, or even have some guys like Jan Peretz and Justin Robidoux, those guys mainly playing in the ECHL, where I think they could have definitely benefited from a season in the American League. But it's a good thing they're officially back, and it's good to see that the Chicago Wolves themselves are back as well, like I said, as they started early in camp. Now, they did announce that 22 guys did start at camp, but of course, a lot of people are like, who are these guys? It's a lot of guys that are filling some depth roles and stuff like that. You got to have, a certain number of players for an NHL roster and stuff like that. Of course, you're going to get the mix of, your Blakes, if he does go there, your Unger Sorms, your Nadeaus, Suzuki, stuff like that. And of course, you get your other guys, your Anthony Honkas and Ronan Seelys and all that. So this is kind of what you're looking, because you got 6 defensemen. Obviously, you're going to have more than that. You're probably going to have 13, 14, just stuff like that. Of course, you got your ECHL club, as a handshake agreement with the Bloomington Bison. Of course, the Bison are officially with the New York Rangers, but there's a mutual agreement where the Hurricanes can send some of their guys to the ECHL. So I wouldn't be surprised if some guys on this current list do go down to the ECHL. It depends on how their contracts and all that stuff works out. Of course, that's some for Darren York, and as the general manager of the Chicago Wolves, gets to figure that out along with his duties as associate general manager of the Carolina Hurricanes. But these are the names right now that are currently at Chicago Wolves camp. You got Danny Kadek, Nick Swiney, Nikita Pavlichev, Austin Wagner, and then you got Dominic Franco, Sahil Panwar, Eddie Mashumiya, Casey Dornbach, Jake McGrew, Jackson Stewart, Jack Gorniak, Gavin Gold, Jackson Lepard, Connor Lockhart, and then for your defenseman, you got Riley Webb, Thomas Stewart, Noah Dory, Dustin McFall, Dante Fantozzi, sorry for the name pronunciation, guys, Wyatt McLeod, and then for goaltenders, you got Mark Sinclair and Joe Verbetic. So, like I said, these are the guys that are going to be starting out at camp, and then, like I said, with how it's going to be, you're going to see a lot of guys from Carolina get reassigned to Chicago. So we already saw earlier on Thursday that the Hurricanes but Spencer Martin on waivers. Of course, he did clear. He is going to be suiting up for the Friday game in Raleigh, but it's just in terms of paperwork. He's probably going to be starting the season in Chicago with the Wolves, so you're going to see him go down there. I wouldn't be surprised to see Jan Peretz go down there as well, and maybe what they're going to do with Kayasev as well. With Ruslan Kayasev, if he's going to be in Chicago as well, you're going to be running with 3 goalies, which is probably what's going to be the case. down there, because just all the games you have in so many ways, you can try to figure out how to work that roster in. But then, like I said, your forward core, you're going to probably get a lot of the guys like Nadeau, Unger Sorum, Josiah Slavin's probably going to be starting the season down there as well. Ryan Suzuki. Defense, we already know that a lot of the guys are going to go down there. Sealy, Honka, Himasalmi. And then it depends on who your seventh defenseman is. Is it going to be Riley Stillman going down there? Is it going to be Joakim Ryan? Is it Ty Smith? So it'll be very interesting to see how that's going to work out for the Carolina Hurricanes. But those are the guys that are kind of right there in Chicago right now, just learning and seeing what's going on. Like I said, as of right now, you're probably going to be seeing some of these roster cuts or these reassignments going to be happening on Sunday since this is the team's off day. It makes it easier, just kind of like a nice little day where like you're not have to worry about going to the ice. You're kind of being able to, hey, you're going to Chicago, let's get you set up and get you up there and stuff like that. So it's probably going to be a day of moving guys, getting them ready to go and having them get up to Chicago and stuff like that. And get them into Wolves camp because they start their home opener is on the 12th against the Milwaukee Emeralds to kick off their season, which is going to be very, very exciting. In the American Hockey League, hopefully, they have missed the playoffs the last 2 years for the Calder Cup. It'll be great, getting this influx of high-end talent, be able to mix in with these guys as well, and then see what the Wolves do. And I'm very excited to see what the Chicago Wolves do down there in the American League this year. Hopefully, we get to see them back in the Calder Cup playoffs and hopefully, running and gunning for their sixth, championship in franchise history. And I think this would be they're searching for their third Calder Cup. So it'd be kind of cool to see if the team is able to do that. And, and hopefully it works out for all the fans out there in Chicago. And, just being able to, keep an eye on the prospects for the Carolina Hurricanes and, just, keep an eye on the American Hockey League team in general too, because it's always good when you see your affiliate win. And that's kind of what you want to see for the Hurricanes. And you want to see that for the Wolves too. The fact that, you're developing guys, but you're also seeing them, win titles. Because you saw that back in 2022 when, you had Steph Neeson, Jack Drury, Jalen Chatfield, and Pyotr Kochetkov win the Calder Cup together as a group. So they know what it's like to win. And you kind of hope you see that with these next crop of prospects for the Hurricanes. So are you going to see that with a Morrow and a Blake and, Nadeau and all of them? And that's what you really kind of hope for. Is just how it works out. So I'm, for one, am very excited to see what the Chicago Wolves do this year. And of course, you've seen it for the last, couple of weeks. We've been doing, having some guests from the Chicago Wolves on. That's going to be a continuing thing throughout the season. I don't know if it's going to be, it's going to be once a month. It's going to be twice a month. It all really depends on how the schedule works out and stuff like that too. But, as of right now, we do have someone confirmed for next Wednesday's Wolves Wednesday, so make sure to keep an eye on the socials for that, as I'm very excited to have this special guest on for version 3 of Wolves Wednesday. But it's always good to, being able to, while this is, Locked On Hurricanes, we're going to be, it's like 99.9% of the show is going to be nothing but Hurricanes-related stuff. I think it's going to be good to have some Chicago Wolves content as well. Just be able to keep up with the team. Friend of the podcast, Andrew Rinaldi, is going to be coming on a lot this season too. Just hopefully like once a month, get a content update from him, just seeing how the Chicago Wolves do. And like I said, hopefully try to get more people from Chicago on the podcast as well, because it's good to hear it from the people that are, at the site, knowing what's going on with the team and stuff like that. So don't worry. There's going to be a lot more Wolves Wednesdays as the season goes along. Like I said, we're just going to try to figure out how the frequency of that's going to work out in my first full season here, because I started way back late at the end of the last season, going into the playoffs. So going into my first full year here at Locked On Hurricanes, going to try to figure out what works. And, it seems like everyone's been liking the Wolves Wednesday show. So if that's going to be something you guys really like, I'm going to make sure to keep that at a decent frequency throughout the season and stuff like that. And of course, like I said, have Andrew come on and get his thoughts throughout the season as well, because he's a little bit closer than I am, because he's based in, up in Grand Rapids in Michigan, but he's able to go to Chicago more often than I can. So a lot going on, but like I said, it's going to be a lot of Hurricane stuff, but we're going to get a good mix of Chicago Wolves content as well. So if you're here for one or the other, or you're here for both, fantastic. It'll work out for everyone for sure. But that will wrap up a Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. If you want to keep up with everything that I'm doing and covering your Carolina Hurricanes and all the Chicago Wolves, you can follow me at OneTrueZach on X. The podcast is LO_Hurricanes. But mostly, guys, thank you for making Locked On Hurricanes your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the 2024 NHL season preview on Locked On NHL, a 6-episode series bringing you the best local insight to make you the most informed NHL fan heading into the season. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to keep up with all my writings at the Hockey Writers, you just go to thehockeywriters.com. You can just go to the Metro, and you'll see the Hurricanes. You'll see my stuff on there. Of course, I do have a link tree if you want to go find an easier way to go check that out. On the link tree, there's also links to my other podcast, the Surgecast. You can look that up on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. Same thing for this show, Locked On Hurricanes on all podcast platforms. If you leave a 5-star rating and review, I'll make sure to read it on the show for you guys. And on YouTube, make sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notification so you don't miss the show. Hit a thumbs up button to let me know that you like the show as well, because it helps us get the algorithm a lot more and be able to be presented more to Hurricanes fans, Chicago Wolves fans, and all that good stuff, because we want to keep growing the show. And, we want to make other Caniacs everydayers just like you, because the good thing is, guys, we are over 990 subscribers. We are very close to 1,000. And if we hit 1,000 subscribers, I might just do something special for you guys. But hope everyone enjoys their Friday. Hope everyone enjoys their second to last preseason game at home at Lenovo Center. Hope everyone has a great weekend, especially on Saturday for the last preseason game for the Hurricanes before we finally get to games that actually matter. Hope everyone has a great weekend. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.